Welcome to Tokyo Wave, recorded in a live studio in Harajuku, Japan, with your hosts Aaron and Parker. Alright everyone, welcome to episode 131 of Tokyo Wave. We're your hosts Aaron Randall
and Parker Allen. On Tokyo Wave, we bring you weekly updates from our studio in Harajuku.
Join us in segments featuring this week's top news,
political happenings,
business,
and other random stuff. Today we are joined by a special guest, entrepreneur, designer, and artist, Hitomi Abiko.
To get us started, here are this week's top news highlights.
Japanese government approves plan for Japan's first casino resort in Osaka.
Uniqlo operator aims to triple sales to $75 billion over next decade.
Tokyo Park, where Babe Ruth played, the subject of climate battle.
This week in Japan. Alright, so our first story. Government approves plan for Japan's first casino resort in Osaka.
Kyoto News has reported that the government has approved a plan to open what will be Japan's first casino resort in Osaka, marking a major advance in the nation's long-running saga over the introduction of so-called integrated resorts.
Under the plan put forward by the Osaka prefectural and city governments, the integrated resort, or IR, comprising a large hotel, conference rooms, and gambling areas, is expected to open on the artificial island of Umeshima in Osaka Bay between the fall and winter of 2029.
Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said, quote, "In addition to contributing to the development of the Kansai region following the 2025 World Exposition, or Expo, in Osaka, we hope the casino will become a tourism base that promotes Japan's charms to the world." He said this while stressing the need for ministers to implement measures against gambling addiction.
The opening of the casino will be formally confirmed with the completion of various procedures, such as the signing of an agreement with a contractor, assessment by the Japan Casino Regulatory Commission, and granting of licenses.
I can help you with that, bada bing, bada boom. But there is still a need to overcome persistent local worries about gambling addiction and a possible increase in crime.
The resort, created in partnership with MGM Resorts International of the United States and Japan's Oryx Corporation, is expected to attract around 20 million visitors annually and bring 1.14 trillion yen, that's $8.6 billion, in annual economic benefits to the region.
Damn. Meanwhile, a similar plan submitted by Nagasaki Prefecture to host an IR remains under review.
Authorities from both Osaka and Nagasaki last year submitted plans to the central government to open casinos in their respective regions.
An expert panel of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism assessed the plans based on a 1,000-point scale that required a score of at least 600 points to gain approval. There's a point system!
They have a point system for everything in this country. Osaka's plan received 657.9 points after assessments of its policies regarding the construction of an international conference center and the positive economic effects the wider project is likely to bring.
But what can they buy with those points? Oh, they can open a casino. I guess that's pretty good. But the panel called for continued monitoring given there are concerns about land subsidence, and said effective measures to prevent gambling addiction were needed upon giving the nod.
Nagasaki's plan included opening a casino at its Dutch-themed Huis ten Bosch seaside resort. It estimates the facility could draw 8.4 million visitors annually and bring in 330 billion yen in economic benefits to the southwestern Japan region.
However, uncertainty about the prefecture's scheme for securing funding is believed to be a reason why the review of Nagasaki's proposal is dragging on.
I am happy that the Osaka one is moving forward as it is. It pretty good news, I think.
Definitely. I mean, we've got gambling in Japan. It's like...
There's gambling everywhere.
There's gambling everywhere. We've got pachinkos, we've got horse races, boat races, bicycle races you can bet on.
Sports betting is big too.
Yeah,
online sports betting.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
So, gambling's one of the oldest sort of pastimes that humans have engaged in. And not everybody likes to gamble, but some people do. Personally, I don't like to gamble, but casinos are really cool. So I'm looking forward to this. This is an interesting development.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and up next, Uniqlo operator aims to triple sales to $75 billion over next decade.
Kyoto News has also reported that Fast Retailing, the operator of the Uniqlo clothing chain, said it aims to more than triple its sales over the next decade to 10 trillion yen, or $75 billion after reporting record first-half earnings.
Tadashi Yanai, chief executive of Fast Retailing, said his company looks to boost its businesses in China, Southeast Asia, North America, and Europe to lift its annual sales to the targeted level from the 2.6 trillion yen expected for the year through August 2023.
Uniqlo stores outside Japan saw a 27.3% jump in sales to 755.2 billion yen in the 6 months ended February, thanks to rising awareness of its brand and solid demand for its thermal underwear.
The thermal heat tech at Uniqlo rocks.
Yep, I'm wearing one right now.
The apparel chain also plans to shorten lead times to provide products that meet customer demand in a timely manner by strengthening its real-time customer information database.
Yanai said at the press conference, "We have seen our sales triple every 10 years in the past stage of growth." And he added that sales are expected to rise to about 3 trillion yen in the next fiscal year, roughly threefold the level seen in fiscal 2012.
In the first 6 months ended February 28th, net profit rose 4.5% to a record 153.4 billion yen, and sales soared 20% at an all-time high of 1.47 trillion yen, driven by its overseas businesses.
That's interesting because I think Uniqlo had a tough deal in its overseas markets in the early days.
Right. But, hearing that the brand recognition has gotten bigger overseas is no surprise, as a lot of my friends in New York love Uniqlo. And, they talk about it all the time.
Yeah, and it's simple stuff. It's just solid colors and no, BS. And it's just very, demure. It's really simple and easy.
Yeah.
And up next, Tokyo Park, where Babe Ruth played, the subject of a climate battle.
The Mainichi has reported that a historic baseball stadium in Tokyo where Babe Ruth played could be demolished, part of a disputed redevelopment plan harshly criticized by environmentalists.
The stadium was opened in 1926 in an area known as Meiji-gaen, a green patch in central Tokyo that's famous for an avenue lined with about 150 ginkgo trees. Plans call for raising the ballpark and a neighboring rugby stadium and rebuilding them in different spots in the reconfigured space, making room for a pair of towering skyscrapers and a shopping area.
Famous Japanese composer and musician Ryuichi Sakamoto, days before his death on March 28th, sent an emotive letter to Koike to oppose the project as his last cause.
Sakamoto wrote, "We should not sacrifice the precious trees of Jingu that our ancestors spent 100 years protecting and nurturing just for quick economic gain."
Sakamoto has a history of being quite a vocal environmentalist and also, being open about opposing things that the Japanese government is doing.
Yeah, he's definitely outspoken, and I don't agree with all of his positions, but this one most definitely.
So Koike touched on the redevelopment being led by real estate company Mitsui Fudosan, at a press conference 2 months ago. She was a driving force behind the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, but has not been implicated in the widespread corruption around the Games.
Yet. The presence of the Olympics helped the city pass an ordinance lifting height restrictions in the area, enabling plans for the new skyscrapers. I wonder how that happened.
Koike said the number of trees in the area would increase from 1,904 to 1,998 through the redevelopment, and that green area coverage could increase from 25 to 30%.
However, Rochelle Kopp, who runs a Tokyo management consulting company and is a leader of the protest movement, said, "However, not all trees are equal. Huge 100-year-old trees provide significantly more CO2 sequestering and cooling effect than small new saplings." I mean, this is just another example of big business ruining Tokyo's cultural heritage. Remember them demolishing the Okura Hotel with, people opposing it, but they just did it. And they, said, well, we'll keep the lobby. It's like, we don't want you to keep the lobby. We want you to keep the building.
Yeah.
It was a fabulous piece of architecture, and now it's this big old blob of nothing.
Yeah, this might be tied to Japan's obsession with everything just having to be so new,
Yeah, and it really sucks because there's not a lot that individuals can do to oppose this movement other than, get up in arms and protest. And, while some people do protest in Japan, the numbers are small, and I wouldn't be surprised if this goes forward, even though it's something that is going to be very sad because, those are historical landmarks, and that area is very special. I've driven and walked around that area so many times, and it doesn't need to change. Build those fucking skyscrapers somewhere else.
Yeah. All right, and up next we have a special interview with Hitomi Abiko, accomplished entrepreneur, designer, and artist.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Tokyo Wave.
Hitomi Abiko plays a vital role in nurturing startups in Japan. As the CEO and founder of Skydia, she leads a Tokyo-based English-speaking design agency established by innovative design entrepreneurs hailing from Silicon Valley and Boston. The agency's forte lies in designing captivating user experiences that tackle real-world challenges.
Skydia's recent collaborations include Melts, where they contributed to the interface design for robot-assisted physical therapy, and Pulp, where they developed a social media app tailored for music enthusiasts.
Hitomi is also the visionary behind Tokyo's premier creative collective called Creative Tokyo, which we believe is probably the foremost such group in the city. As stated on their website, this collective allows you to, quote, make friends, find new work, and learn from the pros, all while having fun and being yourself.
In addition to her entrepreneurial achievements, Hitomi is an extraordinary artist with an extensive portfolio that encompasses mascot designs for prominent brands and character creation for video games.
Hitomi, thank you so much for coming on Tokyo Wave today. We're very excited to have this interview with you.
Thank you for having me.
So, Hitomi, normally on the show, we start off by asking guests about their Japan story, coming to Japan story. But you have such a fascinating background and experience in starting your own business in Japan, launching a creative meetup, and working with so many major brands, character design and design in general. Could we maybe hear a little more about how you got started in design?
And also, you're fully bilingual. I'm also curious, about your background. If you're willing to tell us.
Yeah, of course. So where do I start? I guess So I was actually born in Saitama, so I'm technically Japanese, but I went to the US when I was 5. So that's kind of where the bilingual comes in.
You know, I have to ask, what part of Saitama?
Kotesashi.
Kotesashi. Oh, that's a cool part of Saitama. I'm actually heavily invested in Ogawamachi in Saitama. And I really love the sort of further reaches that are so different from the Saitama that people have in their heads, like Omiya and Kawaguchi, for instance.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if the place I'm from is particularly interesting, but I do recall there being a lot of nature in the area growing up.
I've ridden lots of trains that were Kotesashi Yuki.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So yeah, I was born there and I grew up in the US. And basically my parents don't speak great English, so I learned Japanese at home. But most of my education is basically English, hence the fluency.
Gotcha. And then when did you start really getting into design? Was it, when you were younger, or did this happen kind of in college, or?
Yeah, so actually both of my parents, they actually met at Musabi.
Ah.
What is that?
Musashi Bijutsu Daigaku, so Musashi Art University.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so they're both artists. My dad is an interior designer, so I got a little bit of that background growing up.
Oh, that's awesome. My mother's an interior architect.
Ooh.
Yes. Parker is the go-to for anything interior related.
Yeah, I'm like the Tokyo's most wacky wannabe interior designer.
That's fun. Yeah. I guess my dad did a lot of commercial design. So he actually worked on a lot of those really big projects back in the day. And this was like, 30, 40 years ago? I don't even know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In the heyday of things. So, yeah, like my design interest kind of dates back to that era.
Gotcha. So you moved to the States when you were around 5. And then was there like a time where you came back to Japan at all for a long period of time, or?
I didn't really go back to Japan until after college. So my first job out of college was at Rakuten.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So for a couple of years, I worked under Ichiba CWD, Creative and Web Department.
At Rakuten.
At Rakuten, yeah. So the Ichiba I'm not sure if it's a department per se.
Rakuten has all these like small groups within the company, don't they? They have like a data science group and like.
Yeah, the organizational structure is pretty complex. But
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, but I worked for their Ichiba platform. So if you go to rakuten.co.jp and open it on your phone, that's the website. The homepage is what I used to work on, A/B testing and whatnot.
Oh, cool.
That must have been a hard job because there's so much information on that page.
Oh, but you would believe, maybe you would believe, but each little thing is tracked. So they know how much like sales volume was generated per link.
Oh.
That's what I was looking at.
Oh.
Actually, I worked for a Japanese company, Opt, which is a internet marketing firm. And there I learned they had entered into a partnership with Tsutaya or CCC, where they made Japan's largest offline and online cross-referenced database of consumer behavior.
Wow.
It was called AdPlan. And I mean, the amount of information they had on consumer behavior was so deep and so big, I'm pretty sure it would be illegal in America or Europe or anywhere else.
And Parker, this is like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, no, it was a very ambitious plan and a huge cash cow for the company.
I have heard because of like Japan's point card system, they were able to do really advanced tracking of like customer behavior and stuff, like long before Facebook and all that got involved in that.
Oh yeah, I mean, think about Suica, PayPay.
Yeah,
all of these, systems that you use. they're all tracking, just like Google does, your behavior, what you're doing, and they're using that to, cater ads to you, send promotions to you. It might affect what comes up in your search results or what kind of ads you see, because everything is linked together.
Yeah, and that's kind of the value of Rakuten having so many different services. They would just track it across that one Rakuten account.
Right, right. I used to work for a company and we had access to the T point card, the company. The shacho was like friends with the shacho of T point card, but they wouldn't give us access to any of their user data or anything, trying to sell stuff. So I think it's like heavily guarded.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely valuable database. I mean, it's probably one of the largest and most intricate databases of user behavior in Japan, if not the world.
I wonder if it's been hacked already by Chinese.
Hope not.
Fingers crossed.
So anyways, Hitomi, back to your design story. So basically graduate college and then you start like coming to Japan. Like when was it really that you decided to start your own company here in Japan, Skydia?
Yeah, so after Rakuten, I actually went back to Boston to study UX design.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so one of my marketing colleagues at Rakuten taught me about user testing, and it was very interesting. So I was like, oh, let's do it on our project, the one that we're working on right now. So I basically went around to my doki showing, basically prototypes and watching them from an awkward angle.
That was a question I had that I wanted to ask you because I know you have so much experience in it. UX, the term really now is just so hot and being thrown around and probably misused a lot. But I'd love to hear from you, like, what does UX mean and what does it really involve? Like, because I see on LinkedIn, so many people are now UX designers, and it's like, I think for those of us who haven't been exposed to it, we wonder like what the heck does a UX designer actually do like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a very broad question, but I'm going to tell you right now that UX is absolutely, I think it's been used in so many different ways now that it's kind of difficult to pin down what exactly it means, but it's supposed to mean user experience design, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of thinking from a higher level, I would say, about what a user does on your product or service. So, sometimes people are like, oh, it's like web design where you like have it all pretty and stuff, but not really.
These are the kinds of explanations I've heard recently, like, oh, it's like web design. And I'm like, but isn't that different? Like,
because you can do web design without thinking about user experience, unfortunately.
Right. So is UX, so like whenever you're designing an app or website, UX, from a UX perspective, it's like you always want to get user feedback and testing while you're making it is kind of the...
Ideally, because once you commit it to development, now it's harder to change things. So now you got legacy code, right?
Exactly.
So ideally, you want to do the testing and a little bit of feedback before you, go full on.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, so you're doing, you start doing UX while you're at Rakuten. Mm-hmm. And then what's like the next step to getting to Skydia? Did you start a company right after that because you saw it was a great opportunity, or were there some other things in between?
No, so I took a boot camp for UX right after Rakuten, and that was a 3-month boot camp with General Assembly. They're really famous now, but we were the first cohort in Boston.
I looked into General Assembly. They have a really good game development program, but it's like 2 years long.
2 years, dang.
Yeah, I think it's General Assembly. Is it the one based out of Sweden?
Is it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe I might be getting boot camps.
There's a lot of boot camps nowadays, but it was probably one of the very early ones. This is like, 10 plus years ago? 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
10 years ago. Wow. Okay. Interesting. Because like for me, like just looking at, LinkedIn and stuff, the UX boom seems like it was quite recent, but I guess for a while people have been at this. So
UX, I think, as a concept was really generated in the US and Europe, and I think Japan was really late to the game. Back when I was in university developing websites for clients with my first consultancy, I saw this huge gap in what Japanese websites looked like compared to their US counterparts, and it just blew my mind because these US and European websites were so advanced. I mean, this was already, we're talking about 2010 when, HTML5 and all that stuff was already out there. But Japanese websites, it still looked like, an American website from the early 2000s. And some websites in Japan today, still, it's like they just haven't thought about changing it or don't have the budget or just don't care. Or I've even seen companies say things like, well, we don't want to change the interface because it might confuse our users.
Yeah.
And it is true. I mean, UX is a tough cookie to crack because whenever you change something, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it. I mean, think about, when Facebook changes or when Twitter changes.
Oh, yeah,
everybody
everyone complains
about it.
Yeah, that's why they test it, right? Like, do they complain enough that we have to cancel it? Or do they complain just a little bit, but they get used to it?
Good point.
Yeah, UX is it's like Pandora's box, right? And it's a big bet, especially if you're working on a large site, like for a renewal or like a big rebranding. How are the customers going to react to maybe a new logo or even a new name? And, companies have been ridiculed for their new names and new brands. I mean, think about when Google created its holding company, Alphabet. There were so many memes about that, but everybody kind of forgot about it, and it's Google, so they can do whatever the hell they want to. It's called Alphabet.
Yeah, that restructure now is like pretty praised. What was it? Yeah. Okay, so you do this workshop, and then are you just like, wow? Because we all know, as Parker was saying, Japanese websites, even today, there's a lot of like websites that look like they were made like in GeoCities or like, just bare HTML from like, the 1990s. We're like, oh my God, I have to take this and go to Japan and like, make a business because there's such a huge demand for it, kind of thing.
I did see it as a potential competitive advantage. That said, I think there are two problems to solve. One is definitely the kind of backlash might be a little bit stronger in Japan, simply because when people get used to a thing, in Japan, like they really get used to it.
Yep.
But the second thing is like, I think it's less of the talent. I think there are just fewer people who are, fewer companies who have mature enough design teams in Japan compared to the US. Because the US is like super saturated right now, right? So if you're somebody coming out of a boot camp, it's going to be pretty hard to find a job, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Because I mentor on ADP list, and a lot of the people I talk with are, looking for a job, and like they just finished the boot camp. It's like, okay, the job positions are a little bit few and far in between compared to the number of graduates coming out.
Right. You mentioned pushback from like Japanese companies and Japanese users. So like, although it is a good opportunity, right, to like, iterate over these very old looking websites and try to make them quote modern, but does Japan really want that? And I got asked this question at an event that your creative collective, Creative Tokyo, hosted. Someone in the audience, I was doing it on game dev, and someone asked me, how come we can't make, from a UX perspective in games, how come we can't like make newer looking stuff? Like everything kind of follows all these patterns, set upon patterns. And and I couldn't answer the question. I kind of like froze. I'm like, yeah, Japan has these like, there's like 20 or so patterns and you have to use them. They've been used since like, the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom like era, I didn't know how to answer that. I don't know if you can help answer that or not.
I'm not sure if this is a complete answer, but there's certainly like, I'm not sure if you've noticed that people taking off their masks right now.
Oh, yeah.
There's very few of them. So until you reach a critical mass, nobody's going to probably the vast majority are still going to have their masks on the train.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like one of those, can you hit that critical mass to convert like the rest of them? Or are you still the minority? And you don't want to be the minority in Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does really make it difficult to make design decisions based on best practices versus, what the market will accept. And that's why I think we still see even major Japanese websites keeping the same format. I mean, look at Yahoo News. Yahoo News never changes. I mean, I'm sure they have a very advanced platform for how they pick stories and what becomes top news and what they show to their readers, but the design just doesn't change. And if the design did change, I'm sure there would be Twitter fury from hell because people are just so used to it being the way it is.
Yeah, so I think for sites like that, usually you would take a more iterative approach, a very, very subtle approach. So this is actually what we did at Rakuten 10 years ago. I'm sure they're still doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
But the testing, it can be really, really, really subtle, like moving one section on top of the other, which maybe is a big jump for somebody who's really used to it. But from our perspective, it's like, what? It's just like, I just moved it up. Well, what's the issue? But, people react to it. So you have to make it subtle enough that it's like barely perceptible, but still improving the interface. If that makes any sense.
The terminology for like Yahoo, is that called guided search as opposed to like Google, which is, just a blank box and you type something in?
Oh, because it's catering to two different markets, basically. It's like Rakuten, right? Rakuten is, if I recall correctly, 40-year-old female. That's the massive, like most of the population that was like really gung-ho about Rakuten. And I'm not sure if, I'm sure you understood the chirashi culture and browsing, and it's shopping is entertainment. That's why they do it. Because they're browsing, because it's fun. Right. Same thing with the news or like those, quote unquote guided search things.
Yeah.
You're not there just to like type something in. You're kind of there because you can browse and like look at stuff and be intrigued by the content that's there.
And, this is kind of jumping into some other conversations, but I think this is why ChatGPT hasn't really taken off in Japan yet, because it's still just a sandbox. It's a blank thing and it wants user input like from the get-go, right?
Yeah, I think Japan, at least based on the way like the actual stores and things work, you have a lot more discovery going on, right? Like Don Quixote.
Yeah.
You go in and it's like, what are you going to buy? Like, I don't know. I'll find out.
I love Don Quixote.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's really funny because, each customer is different and different stores appeal to different market sectors. Like we just talked about Don Quixote. I absolutely hate Don Quixote.
Really?
Because it's just so crowded and there's all these big signs it's just like this sort of, it's like really loud.
Yeah, it's like stimulation overload.
Exactly. Well, and the same thing with like Japanese electronic stores. They're always playing that theme over and over and over and over.
Japanese electronic stores is tough.
And I'm sure that they've figured out somehow that by doing that, it makes people buy things.
It's so bright in those stores too.
It's like exciting. I think they're going for the exciting feel, the waku waku, right? Because when you're at a heightened state of arousal, you want to buy more things. I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you don't really see that anywhere outside Japan.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this market and consumer behavior is so different from other markets in other countries. When I was at university, I actually took a course on Japanese consumer behavior, and it was so eye-opening because it was just so different than anything that I had known. And it really sort of opened my eyes to understanding how consumers behave in Japan, how they consume media, how they buy products. And then I took a course on internet marketing. And I also learned how it's so different the way that internet marketing works in Japan versus how it works overseas. Since I took those courses, consumer behavior has changed and internet marketing has definitely changed. And I think in many ways, the Japan market has become a lot more globalized than it was back in those days. And I think it's in no small part thanks to the advent of Japanese actively participating in social media, using Facebook, using Twitter, and through those platforms being exposed to more global products, ideas, styles, fashions. And so I think that in the span of since the dawn of social media, how Japanese consumer behavior, especially among younger generations, has changed is actually massive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the younger generation in Japan has, I would say, not better tastes. That would be rude. But I think their tastes are closer to those of a Western audience because they grew up with, the Googles and the Facebooks and the Twitters, which are all like, basically American products.
That's a really good observation. And, it's the younger Japanese that aren't wearing masks anymore on the trains.
Yeah.
As well.
So there's like a little bit of, when you're less willing to open up to new things, openness to new experiences. I'm not going to say it's like completely just a personality thing. It might just be the age and, like comfort level, They say like, I was reading something, it basically said when you're young, it's like, yeah, you're liberal. And then as you go older, because you've established things in your life, right? And you've contributed to society in certain ways, you don't want that to change. Therefore, you become slightly more conservative.
Yep.
That's a really funny thing. I look at the ads that I get on, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And the ad platforms have decided that I'm like a male in my 50s. Because apparently I have the preferences of someone of that age group. And so it was always very interesting to me to see that, the ad platforms are looking at, what sort of thing I'm looking at and what I'm interested in. And they're catering to that based on this assumption that I'm this oji-san. It's like, hey, guys, I'm in my 30s. Come on.
Like how much the platforms are tracking us and then giving us ads based on that tracking. It used to freak me out, but recently it's actually been extremely helpful. Like if I'm looking into something, especially like if I'm looking into a new project and I want to see what kinds of technologies, software exists already in this area, I will after doing like a 30-minute, deep dive on Google, YouTube, like Instagram, Facebook, every social media platform will show me all of those things that are there. And it's like, wow, I'm like, just passively doing research right now. This is
it's like they're telling you, like, you want to buy it. You want to buy it.
I have a crazy story. I actually took this online MBA called Quantic. Mm-hmm. It used to be called Smartly back when I took it, but the way I learned about it is through Instagram, through an ad.
Oh, okay.
And this was like very early on. I think I was one of the early cohorts. Mm-hmm. But yeah, not bad, right? Instagram
ads are great. So like one thing personally, like I do music and I do music for video games. And there's this huge market of these things called VSTs, which are like virtual software instruments. And there's so many of them. There's tens of thousands of them. And there's all these companies that sell like different kinds of flutes and stuff. So whenever I get back, like if I haven't made music for like a month and I make music, I have no idea. Like I haven't even looked up anything. That night after making music, I'll just get ads for all these new instruments and like new sound like technologies. And I'm like, this is freaking amazing. And I've made a lot of purchases based off of that.
Yeah, I mean, it works. Like, I saw something in my Twitter feed. Someone posted a picture of a helmet that is literally a disco ball. It's a disco ball helmet with a visor.
Did you buy it?
Immediately.
Oh boy.
I found it on Amazon and I just bought it. I just had to have it. It's a disco ball helmet.
I did it yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the impulsive purchasing ability on Instagram now. We're all talking about Instagram because I don't think we fall into the TikTok age group, but I guess TikTok probably has the same setup, much more powerful. Hitomi, I've been a huge fan of your meetup group Creative Tokyo, which alone has about 3,000 members or so.
Yeah, we passed the 3,000 mark pretty recently. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
And every one of your events is always fully booked. It's a party. Not only that, Creative Tokyo actually helps get creative professionals jobs here in Tokyo. My company Shinko Labs did an event with your group in February on the game industry in Japan. There were people who attended that got jobs in the game industry because they attended that event, thanks to you guys' network that you set up. And I heard a rumor, or maybe you posted on LinkedIn, that Creative Tokyo started at a hub in Tokyo.
Yeah. So where do I start? So I was actually attending a random meetup that I got invited to by a friend, and it was for 500 startups, I think. And they were hosting it at this Shibuya hub. It was kind of smoky and not really... not somewhere where you would just casually saunter in, but they were having their event there and nobody kicked them out. And there were 10 of them. So I was like, oh, that's good work.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh my God. So, for those who don't know, I mean, anybody who lives in Tokyo knows about the Hub.
Yeah.
It's this British-themed pub that very few people know this, but it's actually a subsidiary of Royal Holdings, that owns Royal Host, etc. But
really?
Apparently, the founder of Royal Holdings really likes Britain and British pubs, so he decided to create this British-themed pub called the Hub. And it just became this fixture among the foreign community, and it just became the place for foreigners to hang out. And so you go to any of the hubs around Tokyo, you're going to see lots of foreign people, mainly drunk. And but it's a little bit of everybody. I mean, everybody goes to the hub.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The food's actually pretty good. The drinks are strong. I mean, it's, cash on, very casual. You can just go in there and have a beer and go out. It's the exact opposite of an izakaya where, if you go to one of those, you're kind of compelled, not exactly, but, it's sort of expected that you're also going to order food and have dinner. But you can go to the hub, you can order a gin and tonic, and you can slug it down and get out of there if you want to. So it's just super casual. But the Shibuya hub, of course, is infamous because it is packed, jam-packed with people. It's like a nightclub almost.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, personally, I try to avoid the hub because, as he described, he told me it's so smoky. It's usually jam-packed with kind of very drunk people and not usually... as you mentioned, Parker, it's a good place to go in to have a drink with some friends and then go to the next place.
Yeah, it's my suggestion is, there are hubs in less bustling neighborhoods, and those are the best ones.
They're everywhere around Tokyo. It's so weird.
And each one has its own kind of culture. And so, the ones that are in, of course, the most famous or infamous ones are, of course, Shibuya, Harajuku, and Shinjuku. and, you know, the hubs in those areas, and there are multiple hubs. And then there's kind of the main hub, you know, of course, there's that big one in Sentagai that it literally is like jam-packed with people. And it's the same story for the hubs in Kabukicho. But you go to the one in Nishishinjuku and it's a lot more chill.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got a hub out in Urayasu where I live, and it's gigantic. You know, there's like a lot of space. No one is standing out there, you know. It's just really chill. Anyways, but so you go to this meetup, Hitomi, and it's not your meetup, it's someone else's?
Yeah. It was, I think it was just kind of a meet and get feedback from some VCs sort of event.
Okay.
And I think my friend wanted to get feedback for his startup, and I was there and I just wanted to like get some thoughts on what I was trying to do. So
Yeah.
and that actually turned into Creative Tokyo, so why not?
Wow, cool. How long ago was that?
This was back in 2018, I think.
Oh, so not that long ago then.
Yeah.
So you guys have grown pretty rapidly over even
I
during the
guess so.
pandemic.
Yeah, we tried to do a lot of online events during the pandemic, but the core of it was the in-person stuff.
Right. Any, I guess, random question popped into my head. Any, like, you know, future plans to expand Creative Tokyo? Are you guys working on any new stuff right now that you can talk about, or?
Yeah, we're kind of trying to go into more of the job, you know, recruiting space a little bit. Partially because that's a great way for people to experience the value of Creative Tokyo, which is like the connections, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And like, you know, meaningful connections can be, you know, anywhere from like friendships to, you know, colleagues to what have you. And like jobs is definitely a big thing here, especially when a lot of the creatives who come to our meetup, they're either like bilingual or can only speak English. We do have Japanese folks coming in, but I would say the international folks make up the majority. And I guess, you know, finding a job in Japan when your Japanese isn't so great is like pretty difficult.
No, for sure. I was actually at one of your just mixer events like a month ago, and there was a lot of Japanese designers there actually.
Oh, not bad.
Yeah, and I would say like compared to like maybe last year, like this event was everyone was speaking Japanese.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was the way that event was spun up.
Or I think you guys are just digging into the market here.
Maybe.
You're getting more and more people, because a lot of the Japanese were there for the first time. It was their first time going to a Creative Tokyo event.
Interesting. Maybe we're getting more word of mouth these days.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because through Meetup, I think a lot of Japanese people are not really on Meetup. So we weren't able to break into the market early on. And it would literally just be like, oh, everybody speaks English here. Okay, why not?
Yeah. You know, now that you mention it, Meetup was like, when I moved to Japan to do like study abroad in 2011, I remember I was using the Meetup app like in America, but I used it extensively in Tokyo to meet and network with people and like go to like, you know, all night DJ parties and all that kind of thing.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah. It's a great platform. So kind of change the topic, but you know, AI is the biggest thing being worked on and talked about in tech. I've had some conversations with you and your team about AI, and I also know a lot of AI products that exist in the West aren't really localized here for the Japan market. With your experience and, you know, with your company, how do you all see AI shaping and changing the design market here in Japan?
So what I think, at least in the next maybe 5 years, maybe that's conservative, maybe it's sooner, I think AI will probably replace a lot of the quote unquote grunt work that goes into design. So all of the, you know, oh, I just need to learn a tool and move some stuff around. Like I think AI is going to be able to do that because it doesn't really require too much like strategic thinking, which is going to be like a lot harder to replace, I think. Versus, you know, I just need to move this button to a different location or that sort of thing. I think I saw a couple of startups already kind of going into that.
Yeah. There's like AI, like generative AI design. Like I've seen a couple companies that you can like just tell it like make a box and it makes a box in HTML. But I saw some demos myself and I was thinking like, I think it would still like if for me, I would just rather use the GUI and just click the box button or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of UI is built on design patterns, and a lot of those design patterns don't, change drastically from one product to the next. I think that part's going to be easy to automate.
Design patterns. This is an interesting topic. So in programming, we have design patterns that are like, like the singleton pattern, like one thing will only exist only once. Like, is it the same thing in visual design as well? Like, is there, like, what do you mean by design patterns in visual design? I'm curious.
Yeah, so even simple things like an input box, like you input your name or something, you submit a form. That kind of pattern is prevalent, right? And it's probably not going to change drastically. Therefore, it's probably going to be easy to, generate one of those via AI. The structure is set.
Okay. So like user authentication, like you said,
Yeah, like a login, right?
Yeah.
I know like some people do, those login UI screens as like, oh, this is my first like stab at a UI. Well, I think AI is going to do that real soon.
Okay, I see what you mean. Kind of these set upon patterns that everybody uses all the time. Yeah. I've even in my like, tinkerings with Chat GPT, I think I've done some like, basic HTML, CSS stuff to see how good can it like make something look like. I've given it really strange prompts, like make a website that looks like this and kind of see what it can do. And
Cool.
Yeah. It seems to be.
Yeah, it's ChatGPT is like so fascinating, but to be honest, I just haven't gone into it yet just because I don't know. I always think like, what would I ask GPT to do? And I just can't think of a prompt. It's like creative block.
Really? Like you can like whatever you go to Google for, you can actually just ask ChatGPT.
Exactly. That's one of my major use cases. Like honestly, like whenever I open Chrome browser now, I type in chat and then auto completes to the, ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever. And I just ask it everything. I got the ChatGPT Plus, so I have access to 4, but 4 is so slow, and 3.5 is great, but like it's fast, but it's not as smart as 4. Yeah.
Is it true that the data is still like 2 years old for 4, or is that just 3.5?
No, I think the data is still old it's still up to 2021. There's a lot of AI startups though that are like merging. They're using Chat GPT API and like current like live data, and they're trying to get it to work. But funny enough, me and Matt, my project manager today, we were messing with some of those tools, and they're still really buggy. Like there's not like a really great solution that has live data that I know of. I think Microsoft might have some coming out soon. Yeah.
I think it might be available in the US market, but they have like this thing called the new Bing.
The new Bing.
They just called it the new Bing.
Oh, really?
The new Bing. It's the next new Bing.
It's actually pretty cool.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I have to say, when Microsoft came out with this search engine and it's called Bing, it's just like, oh my God. It's like, it's the boomeriest name ever.
Yeah.
Bing! Zam! It's the back! Well, I mean, what were we reading? Like old comic books from like the 1950s?
Like Batman. Like
It's a sound effect.
Yeah.
It's like Bing. Is Bing like holding a big bomb in his hands running around? I mean, what the hell?
Oh man. Yeah, no, but it's really interesting, to see also personally I'm most interested in how will Japan use all this AI technology, and will they, countries like Italy have banned the use of ChatGPT now. And I think this week the CEO of OpenAI was talking to Prime Minister
Kishida, yeah.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
absolutely right. And that is huge because, to my knowledge, that's actually one of the first government visits that the founder of OpenAI has done.
It's the first.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really groundbreaking because we were just talking a few weeks ago about how several major Japanese corporates were banning the use of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, the government is looking to set up an office
Yep.
regarding ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
the government did something the companies couldn't? Holy cow. But I think this is a great development because, I mean, think about the Japanese bureaucracy and how much repetitive tasks and really grunt work that bureaucrats have to do. And if technology like ChatGPT, as long as it's secure enough, could help shorten the amount of time that it takes people to do research. I mean, I'm thinking of like a really concrete example right now. I know that all of Japan's government ministries are grossly understaffed, and these bureaucrats have to research all of these global case studies to figure out how policies are crafted in other countries. And they spend hours and hours and days digging up this information, trying to figure out what it means, translating it into Japanese, and then producing reports or having study groups on the topic. And all of that tedium could be completely and totally cut out of the equation with ChatGPT. Done. You know, what's food safety policy look like in Germany? ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and it's like done.
This is where it could probably do that right now to a very high degree of success and certainty. But I think still we're limited by the 2021 kind of cutoff, and it's not good at reading PDFs. And like I said, there's a lot of startups that are like, oh, you know, we have the ability to, you can upload your PDF and ChatGPT will look at it. I've tried, I almost every day I'm trying like these different things to see like if there's, you know, any big breakthroughs, but it's not there yet. But hey, if the CEO of OpenAI is talking to the Prime Minister of Japan, I'm sure they could make some custom solutions for Japan. And Japan seems to be like the best test case for this because there's a lot of social issues like the declining population and everything.
Yeah,
too.
and I think that with Japan's really fascinating open approach to using new technologies and embracing new technologies like blockchain and AI and of course ChatGPT, it is really refreshing to see the government take a proactive stance on this. Obviously, you know, meeting the CEO, I mean, it's just a courtesy call, but what happens next and how that pans out, that's what's interesting. And so obviously we haven't seen it yet, but there could be some very interesting developments come out of this. Let's hope that it's not the CEO's last visit to Japan.
He gets bombarded by some legal bullshit in the US and ends up in jail.
Oh no.
Classic American tale. No. Changing gears a bit, Hitomi, we have to talk about the fact that you are a brilliant character designer. I've seen your work. You've got this wonderful, cute chibi collection. And then you can do really complex anime styles and designs as well. You're really capable of creating, you know, engaging and authentic art that large companies can use for branding, you know, small companies, startups could use. Could you share how you kind of got into this mascot design and maybe tell us a bit about why mascots are so important here in Japan?
Yeah, so I've been drawing since a very young age. I probably started trying to draw well around the age of like 13.
Oh,
so I've
wow.
probably been drawing for like, 20 years? Oops, my age. But yeah, you know, like I started out in just anime art. That was my thing. I used to like sell commissioned art to people on the internet when it was still pretty early.
There
Yeah.
were sites to do that. I remember. Like,
Yeah, I was on DeviantArt. I was like
DeviantArt.
slightly popular.
DeviantArt. I was on DeviantArt.
yeah. I think.
You know, when I was in high school, I got really into art and design. And at one point, I thought I wanted to be a designer. But then, you know, thinking about it, there's actually a student in my high school art class who was just leagues better than I was. And of course, his uncle is an accomplished artist, and just like his art was on another level. And then, of course, you know, I looked at designer salaries and I was like, you know what? I think I'll leave it to the pros. But I like to do art, right? This is something that I created. It's a really weird painting in our conference room here that we record the podcast. But what is it? I think that, you know, art is something that is but it's both objective and subjective. And it's really something that it's got, you have a strong emotional connection to it.
Yeah, definitely. At least for me, a lot of my drawing was for stress relief during school because I studied a lot. I studied pretty hard. And after that, I just needed like to decompress. And that's where the anime art kicked in.
Oh, okay. What was like some of the first, I mean, because to actually, so let's back up a second. Like, okay, I'll admit, I attempted to like teach myself like 2D art many times in my life, and I've always just kind of given up. And I think like in 2020 during the pandemic, I like wanted to learn anything and everything. So like I got an iPad, I got Procreate, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like be an artist now. And like, you know, I started drawing like chibi characters. I really love that design, everything. But getting like the anime, like really looking like anime design down is so freaking difficult. And I've seen some of your work and like you nail it. Like, I mean, do you think it's just because you started at a young age, or I mean, like what's the process there to actually learn the real Japanese style?
Well, and I also wonder, like, what kind of content were you consuming, and did that have an impact on your art?
Yeah, definitely. I think with learning anything, you always start from mimicry, right? So you always start by copying other people. And back in the day, I was referring to specific types of artists whose art I really liked. Mm-hmm. And not trying to combine styles necessarily, but trying to draw like the anime artists I really liked. So I think, you know, if you're consuming mostly like Western styles, right? Like from, the name is escaping me.
Like Marvel comic style?
Yes, Marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if all you look at is Marvel, then your art's going to probably look like that too, because almost unconsciously you're picking up on certain cues, right? Like, oh, the eyes are supposed to look this way because I've seen it so many times before, versus if I'm just like watching anime straight, my art's going to look more like that if I don't like, you know, pay attention to it.
Right, no, you're absolutely right. And, you know, even the commercial design style between the US and Japan is so fundamentally different. You know, in Japan, commercials are clean and very simple and really friendly. And in
no
America,
transition.
You know,
it's immediate.
Like, you know, buy now, lowest prices ever. We have the lowest prices that ever existed. Buy now, buy now, buy now, buy now.
Is that Japan or America?
That's America.
Oh, okay.
In case you were wondering.
I have experienced some Japanese commercials that have been pretty aggressive, but
yeah, I think, you know, every once in a while, especially younger companies will try a more aggressive ad style. And, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But, you know, the ad industry in Japan is so centralized on the big agencies because they really hold the keys to spots on top TV channels.
like Dentsu
And Hakuhodo.
Yeah, you know, guys, when I first came to Japan and visited in 2009, I was so impressed by the advertising here, like on TV. I remember, I think like I was with a bunch of Americans and we were like, all getting wasted in some hotel room, and we just turned on the Japanese TV and we were like laughing in hysteria, not laughing at like what was on Japanese TV, but laughing at like, because it was so different and so interesting, and like it was a brilliant experience. I absolutely loved it. And then I fell in love with like even just the in Shibuya, like the big like poster design and how they, do the photography and everything here. It's just so different. It feels Japanese.
Yeah, and it's a really unique way of doing things. And of course, there are the good parts and the bad parts. But I think what it comes down to is, all of these ads, these websites, this content that's being created for a Japanese audience is very carefully crafted based on what they think this is going to do for the consumers, that is going to support their business in the most effective way. And that really comes down to the difference in consumer behavior and preference, like, a super aggressive American style ad or an ad that's too funny or too sarcastic. It just wouldn't work in Japan because it would be off-putting. Whereas in America, I mean, you see these really wacky, silly ads that, become, they get millions, hundreds of millions of views on YouTube. I mean, think about the Old Spice commercials.
Yeah.
Do you think you could pull that off in Japan?
Those are
Hell no.
American. So American.
And they're awesome, but they're for an American audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually showed one to a Japanese person, and they're just like, what's this? That was the reaction. Like, why did that need to happen?
Yeah. But he told me you were talking about, you mentioned Marvel, and like, I agree so much. I mean, around the same age that you were learning how to draw, I also tried to teach myself, how to draw. And I remember like I had like a book that was Marvel style. And then like on some website, I was able to get like a how to draw anime book from Japan. But the Japanese one was just so different, and I just wasn't used to it. And it was impossible for me to even like attempt that. I just have a lot of respect, even like in game development too. There's games that like, it's just so obviously it was made by a Japanese studio. There's a preview for the new Legend of Zelda game coming out, and oh my God, it just like looks like people in the comments were like, this looks like the best game ever made, and it hasn't even come out yet. But it's so, signature Nintendo Japan kind of style, like the art style and everything.
Yeah, I think it's the art style, and it's also the attention to detail, right? So I think this goes for the ads as well. I think they even like call it like communication design in Japan. I think I have a book called Communication Design by somebody at Dentsu. Yeah. And, it is thinking about like your audience, what they're used to and what they like. And it's less about you, right? So I'm not sure if, like in the US, it's very me. I'm sure it's similar in Japan in terms of, the consumer consuming things.
Yeah.
But the way they blast it as me is like, it's not quite, gonna stick.
That's a very interesting point. You look at the different style of ads, whether it's online ads or television ads or, digital YouTube ads, etc. You see that like in America, everyone's trying to be different. Everyone's trying to think outside the box. Everyone's trying to do something new that's going to get the people going. But in Japan, it's the opposite. It's more like we need to make an ad that people are not going to be offended by. People are going to see it and it's going to match their sensibilities. It's almost like classical music versus metal. I mean, they're both kinds of music, but the composition style is just totally different.
Right. They have different intentions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this, carefully orchestrated, classical music has certain standards and rules and ideas. And of course, some people sort of go outside the box, but it's very structured. But, obviously something like metal is more creative and individual and raw.
That's actually a really interesting analogy. Being a musician, in classical music, there's a genre called neoclassical, and that's basically, people that are alive now writing in the style of like a fugue or, a sonata or whatever. And it's really hard to get acceptance from the classical community writing neoclassical music. Like, I've written music and I've posted it on like certain forums, and half the people would be like, "Oh wow, this is like really well done." The other half is like, "Yeah, don't post on here ever again. This is terrible." Because they're so used to like the certain set about way of doing things, right? And I imagine maybe with like Japanese anime style art, it's also kind of similar in that it's really hard to break in and get acceptance from the audience. Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I mean, this is a comment, but also a question. I mean, if you really think about, animation and character design, it's really diverse. I mean, I think people, they think anime, they think like Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon or whatever. But in reality, anime is so diverse. I mean, even it's evolved since, its inception. And you see so many different styles of it. I mean, even, mainstream anime. I mean, you've got, really visual effects heavy anime like Demon Slayer or Kimetsu no Yaiba. But you've also got really simple, really cartoony anime like Crayon Shin-chan. I mean, these are both anime, but they are absolutely different in every single aspect.
I love Shin-chan. I love that simple style and kind of dirty. Yeah.
And so that leads me to the question, like, I've never really thought about it, but are there like different schools of anime? And what type of anime or animation art do you find yourself working on the most?
Yeah, so I think part of it is just, visual preference, like what you actually enjoy drawing. It's funny you mentioned Shin-chan because I think people drawing in that style are pretty few and far in between. That said, it is, like an anime. That said, like, I think there are certain types of styles that tend to run more popular. And so if you can draw in one of those styles, it's easier to become a quote unquote popular artist. Yeah. So like at the time I was trying to draw more like otome game style, which I like because it's pretty and it's like flowy and, I just enjoy drawing it that way. And it just happened that it was also pretty popular as a style. It still is, right? I think nowadays
definitely.
It's more the harem, like the harem style anime. I feel like that is really popular. The way the eyes are drawn, like that's really catching on. Seems like every other artist has that style.
I'm looking up the otome game style. It looks very complex.
Oh, yeah, it's complex. I like the shading style. I like how, you can express a lot with just like the color, like gradations and stuff like that.
I feel like it's just this kind of sense of perfection and beauty and youth. And it is really interesting how the characters are designed in that style. And it is definitely one of the more popular schools, I think, for character design, but there is so much diversity in the world of anime. And in addition to that, I mean, I have been looking at American cartoons, and they have literally cribbed anime. All of the new American cartoons, literally, it's just like the anime generation, the people who grew up watching, Japanese animation on Adult Swim, are now making American animation for, various audiences that's totally in that style.
the new Cyberpunk show available on Netflix, I think, is a great example of that. It's like, is this American? Is this Japanese? It's a total collaboration, I think. And everyone on the project, yeah, like you said, are on the American side definitely grew up being inspired by that Japanese style. So
Yeah, interesting how the things we consume as children, come back and, make it big when we're adults, right?
definitely, yeah.
I wonder, obviously the Japanese government is really big on promoting Japan's cultural exports, and obviously characters in anime is something that is just taken off around the world. And so, of course, they've launched the Cool Japan project. There's initiatives, there's funds, there's government money going in all directions to promote this around the world. Have you ever been involved with any of those projects, or you've not really touched it?
I haven't been involved in any of the governmental efforts or anything. I think I tend to lean more on, I was, a freelance artist back when I was, young. I, sold at Artist Alley and stuff like that. I drew at PAX for Roto, I think. Yeah, a couple years back.
Oh,
stuff
wow.
like that, yeah. So more on the, individual creator side.
But it's interesting, though, you're an artist, but you're also the CEO of this agency. And so could you tell us a little bit more about how you went from being an independent artist and designer to becoming the CEO of Skydia?
Yeah, so part of it was, I did corporate. I did my time in corporate. I did get a job after the boot camp, stayed there for maybe 3 years to 4 years, something like that. Kind of on and off. And I realized corporate wasn't really for me. I didn't feel like, I would look at my so-called senpai 3-4 years down the road and I didn't want to be there. Yeah. So that's kind of when I was like, you know what? It might be easier to just freelance and see where I can take myself. And so I hopped on a plane, explored Europe a little bit, came to Tokyo, and I randomly met my co-founder at a meetup.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So we were just like, hey, you're a designer? Me too. Let's hang out at a cafe. And then, one thing led to another. Okay, company.
Wow.
It's funny because that's how a lot of companies are created. I was just like, I think I want to make a company. I'm a company. And then I made a company.
I will say, though, he told me, everyone at your company, I'm like, they're awesome people. I think you have a knack for, surrounding yourself with very positive people. I don't want to, I won't say all their names, but yeah. I mean, have you noticed that yourself? Do you have a strategy for who you decide to work with and associate with, or?
A little bit. But initially it was literally just, do we vibe well? Could you be my friend? And if the answer was no, it'd be because I can be friends with most people, right?
Yeah. See, this is an approach where I think if you talk to a lot of people who run their businesses, and I got this a lot when I was working, as you said, I got this a lot as well when I was working for big corporations, kind of like what you were talking about before. A lot of people told me we're not friends, don't think of me as a friend. And one of the reasons I started my own company is because I wanted to have a core, tight group of people that weren't just workmates. We were, we were friends. We could be friends. We could work and then we could go out together. And I really wanted that kind of camaraderie. Yeah. But at so many companies, oh my gosh, it never existed. Or I would make really good friends with someone and then they'd get fired or something, something terrible would happen. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like most of my doki from Rakuten, most of them are not there anymore.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's one person after the other, oh, bye.
Yeah.
Here's another farewell party.
That's when you know you're at a bad company, is when say like if you've been at company A and you made like 20 friends, if all those 20 people are gone in a year, then you got to get out. Like I had a similar experience to that.
Yeah, I think part of it is just the fact that, in America at least, it's almost common to switch every 2 years or so, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, nobody's going to be here until like 10 years anyway.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy to think about the notion at Japanese companies, especially I was at a real estate company and, they really expected me to be there for 10, 20 years.
Yeah, because it's like, shushin koyo, right? They keep you forever until you retire. That was kind of the ideal in Japan. Maybe it's changing now. Maybe people are like more willing to move jobs. But I remember somebody at Rakuten telling me, it takes 3 years to recoup the costs that it costs to like hire, one of us, shinsotsu.
Whoa, really?
So I'm like, oh, that's why you want to keep us for 3 years.
Wow, I didn't know the cost structure. It's not. It can't be the same in America because people hop every year or 2 years, like you said.
I know, right? I mean, like maybe they, spend more time training us and whatnot, and that costs a lot of money, which is like fair, right? If you're like fresh out of school, what do you know about the working world?
Yeah. For sure. So, Hitomi, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Before we end, are there any shout outs or crazy stories or anything you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I'm just very grateful for my team and for you guys for hosting me. And yeah, like it's been tons of fun. Even outside this podcast, just like hanging out and chatting and stuff.
No, for sure. Absolutely.
Do you spend most of your time in the U.S. or in Japan?
I would say most of my time in the U.S. now.
Interesting. Do you have any like crazy stories of something that's happened or you've experienced recently? Because, America has changed so much in the last decade.
Last 5 years even.
Yeah.
Yeah, the polarization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty intense. But yeah.
Any crazy stories?
I mean, like I mostly live in Boston. So it's been a little less crazy. I think, if I lived in some other state, it might be worse.
Like Florida or Tennessee?
Oh, boy. Yeah, we're a pretty blue state.
Yeah. Boston, I think, is in a really, I say this in a positive way, it's in a really good bubble.
Yeah.
The company I used to work at, we had a Boston office and everyone there was awesome. It's really, really easy to work with them.
Yeah, but it must be difficult living in Boston and not having a PhD because it seems like everyone there is like super highly educated.
It is true. I feel a little bit weird sometimes. I'm like, do I actually have an MBA? I just took this free course that like it's technically recognized by DC or somewhere. But I'm like, is that a real MBA? Do I support it? I usually don't.
Yeah. All right. Well, Hitomi, thank you so much for coming on Tokyo Wave. We hope to maybe have you back in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for hosting me.
Thanks so much for joining Tokyo Wave.
Hey, listeners, that's right. You listener right there.
Who do you think should be our next guest on Tokyo Wave? Let us know. Drop us a line at wave@tokyowave.jp.
We hope you enjoyed Tokyo Wave.
If you haven't already, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Join us again next week on Tokyo Wave.